Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Katy Dunn. I'm an educational counselor here at PrepMatters, and I will be kind of the host of the town hall this evening, and I am delighted to welcome you. We know you have many questions about college and college admissions, and I am so pleased to welcome two fantastic panelists to answer them. We truly would like this to feel like a town hall, so just as if we were all in the same room. To get us started, I will introduce our panelists and ask them to kick us off by answering this first question. What is the top thing you would suggest that seniors do this summer to prepare for application season when many previously planned college visits, school workshops, internships, and general summer adventures have been postponed? We will begin with Candace Leake, Assistant Director of Admissions at Bucknell University. And Candace, I'd like to apologize for our opening slide where we accidentally typed your name as Owen Knight, who is one of our colleagues from Tulane University. So please forgive that typo. After completing her undergraduate studies at Syracuse University in 2003, Candace Leake spent 5 years working in television and film production, casting, and photography before settling into a career in higher ed in 2008. Candace previously served as Assistant Director of Admissions at Stevenson University in Owings Mills, Maryland, and an academic advisor at the George Washington University. Her passion for helping and advising college students has led her to complete a Master's of Science in Higher Education Administration and Leadership at Drexel University, and she is currently in the dissertation writing stage of her Doctorate of Education degree at the George Washington University. A native of Baltimore, Candace is the admissions territory manager for all of us in the area, Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C., as well as Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, which means that for many of you, Candace is the person you will reach out to with questions about Bucknell. Additional responsibilities include managing counselor relations, the Bridges to Bucknell Counselor Visitation Program, and the Charles T. Bauer Scholarship. Welcome, Candace. What wisdom would you like to share with our seniors?
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction. I would say, first and foremost, relax. It's going to be okay. These are, uncertain and interesting, trying times for all of us. So know that as many changes and interruptions and adjustments that you're having to make, we're doing the same thing. And so I think the key is just to remember that, we're all human, we're all in this together, and you're not the only ones that are trying to figure things out. We are as well. So when in doubt, reach out. Try to stay in contact with your colleges, identify your admissions rep if you're able to, just so that you know who your point of contact is to kind of help you along the way. But just know that, we know what's happening. We know the changes that we'll see in your application, and we'll be able to adjust accordingly. So don't get caught up on things that you're not able to control, and rather focus on the things that you still have within your power to have influence over.
That is the most important piece of advice. Control what you can control and don't let the rest of it drive you crazy.
Exactly.
I'm also pleased to welcome Sasha Diem, Assistant Vice Provost and Executive Director of Admissions at Indiana University. Sasha's role at Indiana University in Bloomington includes the leadership and advancement of strategy, policy, and operation for all domestic undergraduate admissions and recruitment. Prior to joining the team at IU, she served as the Director of Freshman Admission in the Office of Undergraduate Admission at DePaul University. She has been an active leader in the admissions community through her participation in both Illinois and Indiana Associations for College Admissions Counseling and her service on multiple committees for the National Association for College Admissions Counseling, NACAC. If you listen to any of the webinars that Jeff Knox and I deliver, we often talk about NACAC. Sasha is a first-generation college student and appreciates the opportunity her role offers for helping other students achieve their academic and professional goals. She earned her MS in Higher Ed and Student Affairs Administration from Indiana University Bloomington. Sasha, welcome.
Thank you so much, Katy. And my colleague Candace really summed it up so beautifully. So the only thing that I would just build on would be that this is for students, that this is still your students' process. This is still an opportunity for them to find the things that are exciting for them. The universities are here, as Candace said, to support them in the process. We are negotiating these changes all the same. And if anything, and we'll talk about this, but if anything, this new comfort with a virtual environment has created more opportunities for you to explore and to find an institution where you could have a really great fit, access to parts of a campus you otherwise would not have had access to unless you were there in person. And so really for students to own this process and to think critically about the things that are so important to them, because that might help to narrow down a little bit earlier, because there are just so many opportunities out there. You could visit all institutions, which is not necessarily realistic either. So just to really take ownership of this.
I'm gonna stick with that thought for a moment, Sasha. That is something I have been talking about a lot with my students in the past week or two. Once school ended and there was a little bit of a breather, I think a lot of students have really leapt into the virtual admissions space. Mm-hmm. And I agree, it is quite a silver lining, but there also, there's a lot of it. So I think there is potential, particularly for some really interested, high-achieving students to find so many choices. I wonder if you have any advice on how to navigate all of the virtual options that various schools are now able to offer in a way that really does help dig down into what are my priorities and how am I ultimately selecting my list of colleges?
Sure. Well, I would say much like we talk to students in I hate to use the word normal, but in a different year, the way we would talk to students about approaching their process, there are ways for you to still receive broad exposure. So you mentioned NACAC. NACAC has moved all of their national college fairs into virtual environments. And so those opportunities or regional programs are a great way to get access to several universities, hundreds of universities, in fact, at one time, and to start gathering that information in an organized but broad way. And then as soon as students know maybe major area interests and looking at or school type that would be of interest to them, then going into those institutions and seeking out their virtual opportunities. And just as that gets more and more specific, now there are virtual opportunities that are more and more specific. So we, in some cases, are able to give students access to faculty within programs in a virtual environment where, again, you would have more likely been on campus for a special program in order to get access to be able to have those questions answered. So even our faculty are more comfortable with a virtual environment and are, able to join in on a Zoom presentation or a meeting. So just starting general, but as you get more interested and more specific in your search, look for those specific experiences.
And Candace, we were just talking before we began that Bucknell has actually opened up the campus a little more. I mean, that question of campus visits is certainly very different in different regions of the country. And so I know that students are, I think, very grateful for the preponderance of online options. But can you talk to us a little bit about what the slight opening has looked like for Bucknell and maybe some advice for families on how to handle school options that are being made available?
Sure. I would say, as things can change by the minute, certainly by the day, but even within the course of a day in terms of options and new state regulations and such. So you definitely want to make sure that you pay attention, even just the day before you leave or the morning before you leave and just to see if there's been any changes. Pennsylvania has a growing list of states where folks are visiting from. If they come to the area, we ask them to quarantine for 2 weeks prior to arriving. So we've really tried to be very transparent about what we're expecting. And so we started out with 2 visits a day. So we have a 9 o'clock and a 1 o'clock Monday through Friday, and then we increased it to 3 a day. We are asking folks to register in advance, and we're really just giving the information session. So we have a driving tour that you can do if you would like to drive around campus. We also have a virtual tour that you can do and a walking tour that we can give you a pamphlet and let you walk around campus on your own. The buildings are closed, so it would be all from outside, and we're really the only folks on campus, truthfully. But just for those who really just want to see the campus and mm-hmm. Talk to us from afar to answer some questions. But, I would say definitely just, be flexible. And I've been honestly very surprised at just how compliant folks have been. We require folks to wear masks, we take temperatures, we're doing a lot to ensure the safety. So I've been pleasantly surprised just at how compliant and easygoing folks have been about it.
That is probably very comforting for families who are contemplating some trips, perhaps, seeing that other folks are taking this question as seriously. That's great. And we can see from your background that it's a lovely campus, and we can encourage everyone to visit both schools. I think one of the questions that our students are wondering about is, when we think about these last couple of months, which are often very critical in crafting their application essays and thinking about, junior year grades, a lot of that has been shifted. So one question we have there's a couple pieces in this, but one question in the Q&A is, how do you recommend that students think about the COVID specific questions on the various applications out there, and just in general, kind of reflecting on their experience during COVID? Candace, do you want to get us started with that, since you're already unmuted?
Yeah, I would say, like with any other section of the application, be thoughtful about it, and don't try to force an answer that is not natural. Don't feel that you have to come up with some, sob story or, some dramatic, traumatic experience if that hasn't been your experience. So it can really just be as simple as, I've had a lot more time to be reflective and to think about things that really matter, and focus on that, or be a little bit more internal about things and reflective and those sorts of things. It doesn't have to be anything specific that we're looking for. And honestly, if you don't feel super compelled to respond, I think that's okay as well. It is an optional question. But I think, just being kind of truthful about where how everything has impacted you, and maybe even how it has impacted others and not you necessarily, and any thoughts about how your views on society and, altruism and such, I think would be nice places to start. But again, don't overthink it and try to make it more than it needs to be.
Again, good advice for all of the college process. Sasha, is there anything you want to add to that?
I would just, everything that Candace said, I think that, for instance, at Indiana, we have our own essay that is used to, not just for admission, but also for scholarships, and passed along to the academic schools for direct admission. And so looking at, we say this every year for any group, really paying attention to the institution's requirements to know how they will review information. And our essay has a space in it if students choose to talk about how they, maybe an adversity they have overcome. For some students, that could have been COVID. But for some students, there's something that has taken a much bigger priority, or happened earlier in their lifetime, or had a different impact on their academic experience. And so that would be what we would look for. The other part of that question is just for students to tell us about their goals and what they're excited about. And I've talked to many students who just want to focus on what they're excited about and don't want to, think about what they're missing. And that, to Candace's point, be truthful to what is you. And that's really who we are trying to understand, is who the student would be when they get to our campus, and what the gifts they would bring, and the knowledge they would bring, and the learning they're excited about. And so that's what we're looking for in the application, and how students want to approach that within the context of COVID is completely personal. I would wholeheartedly agree with that.
I think everyone actually really appreciates that answer. I think that's a great relief. Both of you, actually, both Indiana and Bucknell, I believe, have an essay specific to what are you thinking about studying? What might your academic pathway be? Do you anticipate that this year, when students maybe are not as able to create quite as much of an academic storyline on their transcript as they might some years, that essay might even be more critical towards introducing themselves to the admissions committee?
We always find it critical. We learn more. I don't know how to, we learn more sometimes within the 200 to 400 words. It's a very short essay. There's no room for fluff. You really have to get pretty authentic pretty quickly.
Right.
And so for us, what we appreciate when we first introduced it is it sometimes explained things that we were seeing on the transcript. And so, we would see grade trends, or, it's sometimes pretty obvious. We're expecting to see some differences this spring where it looks like the bottom of a student's world just entirely came out from under them. And so when we get to the essay, a student has articulated that for us. And that explains away enough that sometimes we don't even have to ask for new grades. We don't have to ask for more information. So it's just it provides the context that a student wants us to know. And again, Candace alluded to this too, but this is less about what we want to hear and more about what you want to tell us, what you want us to know about who you are. And for students to kind of own that, we want to see how they approach that process.
Right.
I would wholeheartedly agree. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, at Bucknell, because our essay is just the traditional, choose from the coalition or Common App prompts, and then we have a short response, 250 words or so about your choice of major. And for us, it's because we do admit by major at Bucknell or by college if you're undecided. So since you're able to indicate a first and or second choice major, it really just kind of helps us see, honestly, part of it is if we're not able to admit you to your first choice major, are you actually interested in that second choice major? Or, is that really not an option for you? So it's just an idea just to see what your thoughts are. We know that good chance you'll probably change your major anyway. So it's just kind of, getting a chance to see, where your interests lie and, if you have any real kind of background or what you're just curious to learn about.
I just told a senior today that the vast majority of adults I know are not doing what we thought we'd be doing when we were 18. So it's okay that you're figuring it out. It's fine. Which I do like most of both of the questions I think on your applications and many that I see really do ask, just help us understand what you're thinking. Why is this a direction you're looking at? It's not a lifelong commitment to that major.
No, Katy, I would just mention much of the research about non-cognitive gifts that students bring, one of them is about goal orientation. It doesn't say that your goal has to match what you do in 10 years. It talks about what it means to have a goal beyond high school and even a goal that you take beyond college. And so if you had read my essays all through high school, I was going to be the best nurse that was out there. I was committed to that. All of my research and my work up to that point had been about that. And it was college where that changed. And so it's just about having goal. It doesn't mean that you have to stick to that goal.
I'm going to start adding that to my everyone changes their mind. That's far more eloquent. Thank you.
I've had personal experience with that. So
yes, I was going to be a lawyer, a very good lawyer, I'm sure. So we have some questions about some specifics that I want to talk about. Both of your schools will be test optional this season. Newly figuring out how that looks. One question that I get from students a lot, which I'm going to ask it this way because this is the way the students ask me, and I think it's important to know that's the student voice. If the school has decided to be test optional, will it hurt me to submit my test scores? And how do I decide to do that? Mm-hmm. Candace, want to get us started?
Yeah, sure. Well, Bucknell, fortunately, we had gone test optional a year prior.
A year ago.
So what was awesome is that we were able to decide to do it and be, have it as a plan of this is something that we knew we wanted to pilot at least for 5 years and see how it works out for us. And I think with that, certainly we expect to see a lot more students going optional this year, whether really by choice or just by default of not being able to test. And so I think, it's easy to say, okay, well, for the students who do submit, we've been able to pull ourselves away from how we would have typically just reviewed scores, period, within the process. So, sometimes there's a student where you're like, oh, I kind of wish they hadn't submitted their scores, but, then thinking about, okay, well, they did, but do we really even care, honestly? Our investment in the scores has really just kind of shifted. And so we have really drawn more on the transcript and other academic credentials, and really just giving less weight to the score. So, I think they certainly won't hurt you. Definitely I would say kind of look at your school profile and see where the average students are scoring, just to give you an idea of where you would stand. But we're also looking at context, and we're using actually the College Board landscape tool as well to see kind of context of scores and background and school environment and such, to give context to those scores as well. So there's a lot that goes into it, and not just the physical score itself.
Maybe a question neither of you know the answer to, because I just was triggered when you made that point about landscape. Is there any indication that College Board will be providing information about which regions did or did not have access to testing during kind of the schools that haven't opened up yet? Any thoughts on that? Okay, I was just curious. I might ask that. For the families in the audience, the landscape tool that Candace mentioned is a platform, a dashboard that the College Board offers to universities to just help them contextualize your school, what options were available, it's a sort of a similar school to your school profile, to kind of know, so that you're not comparing scores blindly across the country from students who may have had access to different opportunities. Is that a fair way to describe how schools are using landscape? Okay.
Great. Yeah.
I'm not on the higher ed side, so I'm getting it all from media. But that's an interesting question. I wonder how they will approach that. I think certainly some students have had more access to testing, or may have more access to testing than others. Sasha, any thoughts on how this is, obviously you already had holistic admissions. You just talked to us quite eloquently about getting to know each student, but this may be one less piece of information in your file. Can you walk us through how that is impacting?
So this will be our first official cycle with the test optional admissions process, but we were very thankful, to Candace's point, that we had already made this decision. So our faculty approved the decision in February.
I think it was February, right?
Right, before we knew that this would be the case. So that gave us more time to think about how we wanted to build this process. And I was really excited to hear too what Candace said, because we've built a process that we believe is similar, in that we don't think testing is inherently bad. We just want to put it in its appropriate context as one additional factor among many. And so we actually have built a process by which a student will not be hindered by their test score, no matter where that test score falls on the continuum. And then, because I'll just mention, we have made one process change for this fall because of the COVID situation, knowing that some students may not get access to a test, or may not get access to a test until September, October. And our application opens in August 1st, in fact. And so very soon. So we are going, if a student doesn't have a test score, or doesn't know when they'll get one, or doesn't know if they're going to like it, we're encouraging them to apply test optional. We will review them for admission, review them for scholarships, send their information onto our schools for direct admission consideration. And if they get a score and they want to see what it would do, they're welcome to send it in. And we'll have a separate form for that, for them to self-report those scores. So because of COVID, we're giving students kind of all the options to go through the process. What we can advise students is that it's really probably not going to change their decision because of the way we build our process, focusing on their academics. But if they're nervous about it, we just don't want them to be. Feel free to send it in, and we'll review you all again. So that's something that we're going to be building in this year.
If they've worked hard to and feel proud of the score, you want to be able to honor that
Absolutely.
work.
And so, we want to celebrate it when we can, but we don't want it to hold up an application when we could get you in a decision of admission, before you even take the test. So this year is so different. We're just trying to be as flexible as possible.
So different. And there's a couple questions in the Q&A about other kinds of tests. I know Bucknell actually addresses this right on their website. So are you interested in seeing a PSAT? Yeah, are you interested in, and then the sort of subject test or AP kind of content-based tests are scores that I think students are often excited to show you for content mastery purposes, but it's not really a substitute for the SAT or the ACT. I thought so.
Right.
Like if you got that 4 or 5, like, cool, great. Just, good to see. If you don't,
Good for you.
don't put it on there.
Great.
Absolutely.
Yep. From scores to grades, many students found out just in the past couple of days that their classes are likely to be virtual all first semester. Now, I anticipate that some of the school systems and smaller schools that were not able to provide a full grading scale in the spring, they're more likely to be able to do that this fall. But it has a couple of implications for college. One specific one I would ask, both of you have programs that are highly selective and often have a GPA cutoff. I know Kelly School of Business does, some of the engineering and management at Bucknell. If I don't have as much of an accurate GPA because I went pass fail in the spring, are those requirements being adjusted for the sort of published GPA cutoffs?
Well, Bucknell, honestly, we really don't have like any set cutoffs really for anything, for any programs. I think some of our scholarships may just kind of give ballpark GPAs that we're looking for, but there's no set in stone. But guess what? Our students also had the choice to go pass fail last semester. So it applies across the board, right? And so what we'll be looking for, particularly I think with, the counselors' letters and such, and as much as the students can as well, is just to really try to provide as much context about what was happening. How were you performing in that AP physics class? If you want to go into engineering, for example, like pass or fail, there's a lot of things in between there that could have happened, right? So
yes.
As much as you can talk about or get your teachers to kind of encourage them to talk a little bit about, how you were performing in the classes, and then seeing how you're doing senior year. We always ask for first, quarter or some sort of progress reports just to see how you're faring in the senior year as well. So yeah, we just want to see that you've been successful.
Great. And giving you a lot of different ways to show that.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So in Indiana, there are 2 ways to every major, and this is where I always remind students of this, that only about 45% of our incoming students are actually directly admitted to their program. So majority of our students come in through central advising. And so that GPA threshold doesn't mean you won't get to be admitted to Kelly or any program, because you have this other path to come through. But that being said, the GPAs for direct admission are being posted. They will all have them updated by August 1st before we go live on the application. And the truth is, we don't know what the GPAs will look like. So we haven't made significant adjustments to those thresholds because we just don't know what's coming. But what we have done, again, is to build a process that can accommodate all things. So even Kelly has a petition process. So if a student is close, but it was, a class in the spring that they took this way because their school, that's how it was delivered, or because of COVID or something else, that they can still submit that petition and still be considered. So there's always a process to try and take that holistic approach. But to everything that Candace said, we're going to be looking at a very broad picture of everything you've accomplished and contributed. And we're going to put your grades in the context that you tell us, but also with our larger awareness of what we all experienced this spring, including, I love, Candace, that you mentioned our current students who are negotiating this too.
Right, which is a nice reminder. These are institutions of education who have been managing all of these same questions at a large scale compared to many of our secondary schools. So you get it. And every time you speak, I remember that your office is just rapidly doing so many things all at once. And we're grateful. You did mention, Candace, first quarter grades. Typically, I think students who apply with those early deadlines do not submit first quarter grades. They usually may rely on their previous grades. And then, once you get to the January deadlines, you're usually looking at first semester grades. Do either of you anticipate looking at those earlier grades, the first quarter or first trimester for some students?
We try to. We always ask for something for senior year. So for our deadlines are November 15th and January 15th. So normally, at least by December 14th, 15th or so, when we're sending out the first round of decisions for early decision, that's still enough time to have some sort of progress reports, even if not a full semester of grades. So we always want to see as much as we can, even if it's just a report card, just to make sure that students are still doing well. And we ask for that later on, even after you've been admitted, especially early decision, like, don't think that now you can slack off. We want you to maintain what we admitted you under.
Did everyone hear that?
Or the changing schedule after you've been admitted, no, we don't like that.
We actually build that expectation. It's in the admissions letter. It just comes after congratulations, so it's sometimes missed. But it's built in there as an expectation, so I'm so glad you mentioned that, Candace.
This former high school principal is very excited to hear all of that.
I would, it is, to what Candace was saying, it's not uncommon for us in any year to ask for more academic information. And so we always remind students, and we've tried to adjust the letter so many different ways to be encouraging, but to say, we just want to see a little bit more. It doesn't mean you're not admitted. It means that we're actually excited about what we've seen in your application and we want to see more. And so I think this year will be similar. We know that even in our state of Indiana, some districts used an incomplete as an option in place of a pass-fail. And so in some cases, those would be required courses that we may just logistically need to see that they are complete. And so it doesn't mean that it's bad. We end up admitting a lot of those students who we ask for more information. And then to Candace's point, yes, every student is required to send a final high school transcript. And so that's, I think, pretty standard.
And should be obvious. One question I know we get a lot is, and this time of the summer, maybe this is even more relevant to ask, but are you seeing an increase in requests for deferment for students who were supposed to start on campus this year? And if so, do you anticipate that having any impact on admissions for the current seniors?
Oh, you want me to go first? Okay.
You're on a roll.
Honestly, I was surprised personally that we didn't receive more requests. And I think we tried to extend the deadline as long as we could. So we gave students until July 15th to notify us of a request for a deferral. And honestly, it's been very similar to what previous years would have been. So, and we are residential, so it really does matter in terms of with everyone essentially living on campus, we really need to know how many students will be with us each year. But we've been very fortunate that our numbers really have not been impacted in that way, that we were able to accept and allow all of the deferral requests we got.
Great. And Sasha, I see you nodding. Are you seeing
it's similar. It's similar. We were, as Candace said, we were prepared. We tried to prepare our hearts and our minds for what that would look like if students, for all kinds of reasons, determined that this was not going to be the best option for them. And we have not seen an increase dramatically in those numbers. Now, the next few weeks, certainly as students start to move in, things change around the country, we may see that shift. We give students up until 2 weeks before the start of the term to tell us if whether or not they're able to attend and request a formal defer. So we'll continue to monitor those numbers, but we haven't seen that happen. And then, I know some of the concern is if those numbers peak or spike, will that take away spaces for the following year for all of you considering this process? Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to be really institution specific. Based on, capacity in the halls, capacity in the class. But as Candace said, institutions are planning for that as they consider the defer requests that they honor. And for those that have those restraints, have deadlines, and so that they can accommodate and manage that. Those of us that are a little larger, we may not have the same constraints because we will have more spaces. And so I don't believe that it's going to pose a dramatic risk like we thought it might. I don't foresee it impacting the admission spaces for students looking at this process, which is exciting.
And I have to say, that is the answer I am hearing from most
Great
schools. I ask that question a lot because it is, I think, a real source of anxiety for students and parents. And it's one of those components of admissions that feels very mysterious, that from the outside, we can't know what happens. And there's so much talk of deferment. And so I think I've been pretty grateful, actually, that so many schools have been able to sort of candidly say, this is how we're doing it. This is what we're seeing. If it becomes an issue, then we'll deal with it. But right now, we're not seeing it as an issue, which I also think speaks to the real commitment that families have and that students have to get on their campuses. You know, I think this is a time in life where students are so excited that, and it's clear that colleges are working with families to try and make that safe and accessible. And I think that all kind of goes hand in hand.
Well, this is about a college journey, but this is about a journey to a student's career and profession and a successful and fulfilling life. And our goal and our responsibility is to keep students on that path. And so what we've told families and have committed to families is that we're ready to help support them. And this is a huge investment. You want to get the return on this investment, and you want to get that return on this investment as soon as you're able. And so we want to help students negotiate that. So I'm glad I'm thankful that's what you're hearing from other institutions as well.
Yes, I think it's kind of a pleasant moment for in all of the chaos.
Honestly, if you don't mind, Katie, I would just add as well. I think in a lot of cases, I think deferred students almost just kind of end up being bonus students for the next year because students can still back out, right? I mean, you've already paid your deposit, but you still have. There's a certain point where you have to officially commit. And for us, I think it's usually around like February or March to secure that you're definitely coming. But we can't base enrollment decisions around, we have to save these 20 spots or so because those 20 could turn into 7, right? So they really don't factor into the next year. They're just kind of like, oh, we have this many and now a couple more on top of it.
Yes, in most schools, the extra students is a problem we'd be delighted to have, right? If we happen to have too many great candidates enrolled, we'll make it work.
Exactly.
So I have a question from one of the audience members that takes us a little bit back to where we started on thinking about encouraging students to dig into what they're looking for and how to understand schools. And it's got a couple pieces, so I'm going to go ahead and read it. And then Sasha, maybe you can get us started on an answer to it. So Mr. Leonard says, how do you figure out what is important to an institution and what the institution's character is in order to answer the question, why this school? Why us? Honestly, on a top level view, many schools seem to have the same values. So to answer this question feels generic, but schools, of course, want it to be specific. And there's a lot in there that I really think resonates with a lot of students as they're looking at that why us, and as they're building the list, even before they write the essay, just how do I decide when all these schools say the same great things? What advice do you have from that, Sasha?
I think this is where, and I think this year in the virtual environment, it presents some pros and some benefits, but also some challenges. So yes, on the surface, our missions look similar. Our goals are similar. We value similar things. So I can absolutely appreciate that. It really comes down to getting to know the institution and having a narrow enough set that you have time to get to know those institutions. And so, and the way I would do that is talk to the people. When you talk to students, look at student profiles and student stories, get into the Facebook experience and the Instagram experience, all of that, but also talk to the faculty and the staff, and you start to sense a personality. We hear that a lot, that as student families work with us in the fall and all the way through the spring, they get to know us and they get to see a consistent experience. Now, what really makes this sing is when you can come on campus and feel it and meet the people there and see how people engage with others. I often tell students, just sit in the Union for an hour and watch people go by, and can you imagine yourself walking, in this space? So I'm hoping, by spring that can be an option for families to really be able to do that in meaningful ways, because I think that's really where institutions start to stand out. But in the meantime, do the virtual visits, have virtual conversations, ask questions of faculty. They all have unique research stories and unique research interests, and see if those resonate with you. So it's really getting to know the institution beyond the surface, where you start to get that information.
Mm-hmm. A panelist we had on a call recently suggested that maybe we are looking at a flipped classroom future for college admissions visiting, where you can do some of the stats and the town and the big picture stuff at home on a virtual tour, and then get on campus and only have to worry about what is the ethos of this institution.
Absolutely.
What is the student experience like? It was a lovely vision. So maybe we'll all get there.
I think that's what we're seeing happen. We kind of half joked as we were coming into the spring, and for this class it was opposite. They did the application process in person and came to visit us, but when it came to the spring final decisions, they didn't have that experience. But they were combing our websites and our academic pages in ways we had never seen before. And so the level of questioning, the depth of the questions we were receiving were amazing. And so we said, this is going to be the most well-read class we've ever had. And so our pages are better because of the work your peers did the year before you. Our information is better because of the way they poured through that. So I think you're right. It's different.
Candace, anything to add on that sort of question of how you really get at the mission and ethos of a school?
Sure. I would say, I think a very underutilized section of a lot of schools' website is the About Us section that you don't necessarily think to go to, right? It's not like a, flashy, kind of exciting, oh, let me run to, the mission and value statement. But honestly, that really kind of sets the tone for what you should expect to see in all of your other interactions. So, clearly being able to see, like, what is the mission? What is the value statement? You can find some keywords in there, and you'll kind of you should see those same, kind of words reflected in the admissions preview session and, in different communications, because those are, they're buzzwords that they're using. And then kind of take those, and really before you begin, I always encourage students to really kind of think about, what are your values and priorities, right? What are the things that make you go? What is it about your current, well, maybe not current, but your current high school situation that works for you? It doesn't work for you. What are you looking to hopefully have other opportunities to do? And kind of use that as the basis to kind of identifying, what is it that I need? What is it that I'm looking for? And now I'm trying to find a match there. And then, once you do get to interact with, folks at the school, if it's not physically, visiting, which you might not be able to do for a while, it's often in those informal interactions where you really get to see outside of the script, outside of the, formal presentation, the Q&A after, where you can dive into a little bit of stories and any opportunities to talk with students, where I think you get to see a little bit more of the realness of what that school ethos is really about.
Several of my students have told me that there are a number of schools that are doing virtual student panels, which is great. And some of those virtual panels, the admissions team is at some point leaving just the students to speak to the students, which I think just feels, it feels very sort of honest and mature. I'm confident that the student panels would say the same things regardless of whether their boss was there or not. But I think that from the viewer point of view, it really feels like you got access to something important and special in understanding that student experience. One particular kind of student that I think is especially feeling nervous right now are students who had hoped to play at the college level in college athletics. We only have about 10 minutes left, so I know this is too broad a question to really dig into. But if I'm an athlete, and maybe I'm not the top athlete that got super recruited when I was a sophomore, but it's important to me and maybe a part of my college journey. And my spring season was canceled, or my travel season is canceled, and now my fall season may be canceled. Just any very quick, particular advice that you would give to those students or their families or their coaches? Sasha?
Well, we have a lot of students who either don't wish to or don't quite, their gifts aren't quite the Big Ten athletic perspective. So at a school our size, there are tremendous opportunities, from more competitive club experiences to intramurals, and that are sometimes pretty competitive. And so I think that there are just, if a student has gifts that they want to celebrate, whether they are athletic or otherwise, that, if that's part of your value set, because either it's a competition, competitive spirit, or it feeds your soul in other ways, then you can absolutely find those. So those they're going to look different this fall. This fall, we're negotiating what that's going to be like. But as students, I don't think that you should take that off of their question set as they explore this next year.
And I would say both of your campuses, actually, school spirit and athletics is a strong part of the student experience.
Yes.
I would say almost a quarter of our students are actually athletes. We have quite a few. We have 27 Division I athletic teams. So sports are a lot of, or pretty important to a lot of our students. And so it's heartbreaking to know that we've canceled the fall season for them. But I think, certainly, one day, you will get to play again, one day, maybe not your first year even, potentially. But I think, for student athletes, I think that also challenges you a little bit more also to really remember the other components of why you're going to college, right? Most of the students that are going to college and playing sports are not necessarily going professional afterwards. And so while that is certainly a big part of your experience, maybe it gives you a little bit more of an opportunity to really focus on the other components of what that college experience would be. Say athletics weren't an option, right? Then where would you go? Because you might honestly have a little bit more liberty to really choose the places that are better fit for you overall, and not necessarily as driven by where you're able to pursue your sport in the way you like.
That's right.
That is a great point. I always try to say to my athletes, just in case we broke all your limbs, do you still want to go to this school? Do we still love it? We do have a couple questions here about deadlines. So the question of, both of your schools has a couple different options for early action or regular decision. Do you have advice for families on how to choose the deadline that is most appropriate for their application? How they should be thinking about that?
Well, ours is truly early action. There's really no there's no downside for us to apply early. We get about 80% of our applications by November 1st. So that means we get to review them earlier. And so we strongly encourage students to apply early. I know every institution is a little different. So.
And we're early decision, so you really need to know, especially for early decision 1 that has the November 15 deadline. Do you feel that you can commit fully? Whether have you had a chance to visit? Are you able to commit without having visited to still be able to say yes, I'm coming if you admit me? And so maybe early decision 2, if you still are wanting to do early decision, that gives you at least until January 15th to make a visit and have a little bit more time. But certainly, there is a regular decision pool as well. So, don't feel, certainly now, don't push yourself into an early decision process if you don't really feel compelled that you can make that decision.
Or if you're just like I was, and I was in high school and could never have made that decision. It's not quite as mature as some of the students I work with today. I think we had one more question in here I wanted to touch on before we, oh, yes, I did not ask this and I should have. How do merit scholarships or named scholarships get consideration at both of your schools, you know, particularly in the test optional environment?
Unfortunately for us, we have taken scores out of consideration for scholarships. So there's no kind of hidden, you know, you can apply for admission, but not be considered for merit if you don't submit scores. So it's truly test optional in that sense. And so we do have, a lot of our scholarships do have other application, you know, maybe an essay or short response or something. So we are allowing students to apply for up to 3 of our scholarships. So you are identifying on your own scholarships you're interested in. There's only really one that doesn't have an application that we just award. So we do kind of put the responsibility on the students to select what you would like to be considered for.
And similar, we students who apply test optional or test considered will be eligible for merit scholarships at the point that we review students for admission. We'll also share their information with our Office of Scholarships. There's a second opportunity, second layer for students for our named awards. And so they receive access to a scholarship portal, kind of like what you would see with FastWeb or scholarships.com, where you have a profile within that portal, and then it shows you the named awards that you may be eligible to apply for. So there's 2 different processes, but test optional students will be considered. And in fact, our Office of Scholarships is working with all the named awards that did have test as part of the criteria to see if they can rework those agreements so that, you know, so those are active efforts that are being made.
So many dominoes need to fall.
Absolutely.
When these kinds of changes are made at such an institution.
Absolutely.
Again, just very grateful for all of your work. Pardon me. One final thought. I know a lot of schools in the fall, a lot of students rely on those school visits that you would be able to do with high schools. And I know that a lot of admissions officers really enjoy that part of the role. My gut tells me you will not be visiting a lot of schools this fall, and at least in my area, there won't be schools for you to visit. Are you looking at additional ways of partnering with high schools to have further, maybe more direct virtual options? Lots of head nodding.
Absolutely. I think some schools, I've even seen some schools where they've talked within a district, or even just larger schools where they partnered together, and we work with that group of high schools to create virtual visit opportunities. So we're open to all kinds. That's the beauty of this year. We're open to all kinds of creative ways to engage with, you know, with students during the school day or after, or, you know, one-on-one. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. I'm saying, you know, unlike, you know, well, it's, you know, lamest, you know, travel season ever, right? Like traveling from your bedroom to your virtual office. But, you know, unlike in person, you know, the in-person visits, we can literally only be in one place, you know, at a time. Virtually, I can be in the whole state, you know, at once. So I think the opportunities really do open up, that you have access, and honestly kind of in some ways levels the playing field for a lot of students where no one's visiting, right? And so there are no benefits or, you know, having to take time off and fly across the country to visit schools and that sort of thing, that you really can visit a lot more places virtually in ways that you never would have been able to before.
I agree. I hope that is the silver lining that we all find out of this. You know, it's certainly an incredibly difficult time for students. And so recognizing that there is this increased access, maybe they'll find some schools that they wouldn't have previously considered, I think is something that gives me some hope. So since that's a hopeful thought, I think we will end there, Candace. Thank you so much. Thank you to both of you. This has really been, I'm so grateful, and to our viewers for such thoughtful questions. We appreciate these candid answers, and we have updated Candace's name on our slide. To all of our viewers, please reach out to us at edplanning@prepmatters.com if you have any questions or suggestions or comments. We will continue our town hall series for the next several months, every 2 weeks. on these Wednesday evenings. So our next town hall will take place 2 weeks from now on Wednesday, August 5th at 7 p.m., where Director of Educational Planning, Jeff Knox, and I will dig into how to approach the Common App to save yourself some stress and start your application journey smoothly. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. I wish all of you the very best. Have a great evening.